Although there are no more Breaking Bad sequels or spin-offs in the works, the possibility of a Heisenberg movie has been a hot topic of discussion recently. Unfortunately, the only story a Heisenberg sequel could cover is one that's already been done. Of course, the likelihood of a Breaking Bad follow-up centered on Walter White is fairly low. Vince Gilligan doesn't sound enthusiastic about more spin-offs, and Walter's fate at the end of Breaking Bad makes it difficult to continue his story. Any attempt to do so would need to retcon the show's near-perfect conclusion. And even if Breaking Bad could find a way to bring Walter White back believably, there's nothing left for Bryan Cranston's character to do. He's a wanted man after Season 5, so there's no way he'd be able to make meth or embrace his identity as Heisenberg again. And it's dubious that he'd be able to skate under the radar long enough to live anything near a normal life. There's only one story left for Walter White, and it's one that Breaking Bad fans already watched play out, just with another character. The only possible story for a Heisenberg sequel was already told in Better Call Saul. If Walter survived, he'd have to go into hiding. There are several reasons a Heisenberg movie would ruin Breaking Bad's perfect ending, and one is that this sort of sequel has been done before. If Breaking Bad ever followed through on a Heisenberg sequel, it would likely tell the same story as Better Call Saul. After the crimes Walter commits in the original show, he'd be forced to live in hiding if he was brought back to life somehow. Like Saul Goodman, Walter would need a new identity, and there's no way he'd be able to return to a life of crime. A Breaking Bad sequel about Walter would likely see him embracing a new identity, then trying to avoid being noticed or arrested. For such a project to have any purpose, he'd need to have the same ending as Saul Goodman, too. A movie about Heisenberg going into hiding could only end two ways: with his death, which we've already seen, or with him seeking redemption for what he's done. The latter would land him in prison for life, making a Heisenberg sequel a carbon copy of Better Call Saul. A Breaking Bad sequel about Walter White risks feeling too repetitive. Copying Better Call Saul won't make for an interesting spin-off. Split images of Bryan Cranston as Walter White talking on the phone and wearing a hat in Breaking Bad custom image by Debanjana Chowdhury. Walter White and Saul Goodman are two very different characters, so there's little reason their narratives should end the same way. Walter's fate in Breaking Bad better suits his character, and that's far from the only reason to leave Heisenberg alone. Returning to his story also risks feeling too repetitive, as there's no way around a Heisenberg movie becoming another Better Call Saul. Such a familiar story might not appeal to viewers, and retconning Walt's ending won't make people happy either. It's too risky to return to Cranston's character, and it could hurt Breaking Bad's legacy. Breaking Bad also has a follow-up film already, as Netflix's El Camino shows what happens to Jesse Pinkman after the events of the original series. This means Breaking Bad has three great conclusions, eliminating any real need for another. If the creators ever choose to return to the series, it should be in the form of a prequel. Most of the characters' arcs are completed in the post-Breaking Bad timeline, and it will be nearly impossible to come up with a fresh and interesting story for a sequel. If Breaking Bad ever continues, it should be without Heisenberg. There's a better character to follow in a spin-off. A custom image of Bryan Cranston as Walter White in Breaking Bad custom image by Debanjana Chowdhury. If the Breaking Bad franchise ever continues, before or after the original story, it should do so without Heisenberg. Walter White's narrative is perfect already, and there's no reason to dredge it up again. This is especially true when you consider that there's a better character to helm a Breaking Bad spin-off, Gus Fring. Giancarlo Esposito's drug boss has an intriguing backstory, and it's one the franchise hasn't touched on nearly as much as viewers would like. Needless to say, a Gus prequel would be far more welcome than a Heisenberg sequel. Showing what becomes of Jesse after El Camino or Skyler White after Breaking Bad would also be more compelling than a direct sequel with Walt. There's also Mike's backstory to consider. Gus Fring's right-hand man is a corrupt police officer before he joins Gus Operation, and that could be intriguing to explore. Any of these options would be better than bringing Walt back, just to rehash Better Call Saul's story. Breaking Bad's legacy deserves better than that, and so do its fans.